Okay, welcome everybody and hello, and welcome to the 2022 Thorne Harbour HypoTHetical entitled Zoom Zoom Professional Intercourse Online. My name is Simon Ruth, I'm the CEO of Thorne Harbour. You may know me from a series of videos where I asked you not to have sex, and then a series of videos where I said it was okay again. I'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging that we're broadcasting live from the traditional lands of the Kulin Nations. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. I'd also like to acknowledge that we have the member for Northern Metro Region, Fiona Patton, with us tonight. Many present and past board members from Thorne Harbour Health. Greg Carter, past president of Thorne Harbour Health. Craig Brennan, the president of Living Positive Victoria. And Craig Burnett, Mr Leather 2021. Okay, and Happy New Year to anyone who's celebrating the Lunar New Year and the Year of the Tiger, and happy St Bridget's Day to any pagans who are with us today. COVID continues to play havoc with live events, and we have a smaller crowd than usual, but many more people watching from home due to social distancing requirements. Unfortunately, Michelle Shepherd, who is meant to be with us on the panel tonight, is unable to be with us and sends her apologies, and we wish her well and hope she's feeling better soon. And because this is a broadcast, the panellists won't be wearing masks once they take their seats. That being said, it is my great pleasure to introduce our wonderful panel. They're a queer trans sex worker, the acting manager of Victoria's peer-based 100% sex worker controlled organisation Vixen. So please put your hands together for Dylan O'Hara. Former CEO of Living Positive Victoria and long-standing international advocate and activist for people living with HIV. They're ready to turn it up and turn it out. Give it up for the fabulous Brent Allen. Brent clearly bought his fans tonight. Their fans tonight. Whether it's for a more sustainable future, gender equality or international human rights, he's passionate for policy reform and he's ready to bring it to the stage. Please welcome Jeswin Yogaratnam. They're the CEO switchboard, and after our last HypoTHetical, they were the first in line to get back into the ring. Show some love for the proudly trans Jo Ball. She brings passion to the Parliament of Victoria as the government member for Eastern Region in the Legislative Council, and much passion to this stage. Welcome back for her third HypoTHetical, Harriet Shing. She's recently added OAM to the end of her name after years of carrying the banner for rights of our LGBTIQ communities, and today she leads the way as the President of Thorne Harbour Health. Please put your hands together for my boss, Janet Jukes. Fuelled by their lived experience and a belief that we're stronger together, they're the co-founder of the Forcibly Displaced People Network, and working to lift the voices of displaced LGBTIQ people. Let's hear it for Renee Dixon. And he's the Legal Director at Equality Australia and is a seasoned pro when it comes to advancing the legal rights of our LGBTIQ communities. Stomp your feet for Gisang Kasasia. And finally, she's an award-winning performer, writer, artist and a comedian. In 2029, she added HypoTHetical panellist to her CV, and this year she can have moderator as well. Get excited and make some noise as I hand it over to our moderator for the 2022 HypoTHetical, Zoe Coombs-Marr.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Simon. It's delightful to be here. I was at the last HypoTHetical that happened in 2019. They had to pretend that it was cancelled since then because of COVID, but it was just because I wasn't available. That was just a small joke to start us off. So before I outline the way that the HypoTHetical is going to run tonight, Just a little bit about me. I am a lesbian. I always think it's really... Thank you. Thanks. I always think it's really useful just to clarify that right at the beginning, because I know it can be confusing. Like, is she a lesbian or just from the country? Both. Double whammy. I'm very high up in my coven. You will notice I did not say witches, because the correct term is hex worker. That's a very good joke, that one. I took the rest of the day off when I wrote that joke, so you're welcome. Thank you. I think we're going to get on. Now, tonight's hypothetical, let's get down to business. COVID has changed the way that we live and work, perhaps forever. I've never pivoted this much, well, not at least since I was in the under-9 netball team. Adjusting to online meetings, conversations and exchanges with colleagues can be a challenge. Is my house a mess? Are people sick of seeing me on a tropical island? How do you keep your cat's ass out of the frame? Answer to that is you can't. Just let them do what they want. Also, how can you drink on screen without anyone noticing? Brent?
It's tea.
So, in keeping with our online pivot, in our real lives, tonight's hypothetical will play out on these screens. I think that's tea. If there are any technical difficulties, or if everyone's all of a sudden on mute, that will just give me an opportunity to tell you all about the poodle that I got during lockdown, which now has separation anxiety. I'm sure we all relate. So, our characters. We first met Janice Plackett at our last hypothetical, Loose Talk in Public Places, back in 2019. She's an Aquarius with a Scorpio rising. She loves long walks, Cher and Casey Chambers, but she hates risotto. She's a fiercely patriotic Australian. She's broad-minded, but she hates modern art and Federation Square and tinned passion fruit. She's a single mum with 3 kids who loves life. She's a little bit naughty and she'd love to give Brett Sutton her mobile number. Dafford Rowlands is a millennial IT specialist whose hobbies include bushwalking, competitive gaming and spanking. And he'd love to give Brett Sutton his mobile number. In his new job, he's about to be onboarded by Janice, which, yes, does sound like a torture method, and he will also be managed by her weekly, which might be worse. And it's all going to happen online. It'll be obvious to everyone these characters are a little bit like cartoons, but they might not be too far from some people you know. So it should be clear to everyone by now that the Zoom world can hold hidden traps. Is my lighting okay? My background to blur or not to blur? Do I only need to dress from the waist up? Yeah. Let's join Janice from HR and new employee Dafford as they negotiate their new working relationship online. From time to time, we'll push pause on the action, and that'll be the cue for our panellists to dissect the issues being raised. Now let's join them as they click on, unmute, and get down to business.
You're on mute there? Hi, you're still on mute. You're on mute there.
Okay, so I got a poodle during lockdown. I'll let you guys, I'm just going to tell you about the poodle while that glitch. Do you want to just keep trying and I'll tell you, I can talk for ages. His name's Top Chef. He is beautiful. It's quite full on getting a new... There we go.
You're on mute there? Hi, you're still on mute. You're on mute there. You're on mute. There's a button at the bottom of the screen. You're on mute. I cannot hear anything you're saying.
Crumbs! You must have thought I was all blanket no picnic there for a minute. Yes, mute, the mute button. I keep forgetting that that's there. Mute, yes, mute. You know what? I'm going to write it on a piece of paper, on a sticky note, actually, because it can waste a lot of time. There we go. Mute. See? Now I won't forget.
Oh, no, now I can't see you at all.
Yes, well, I can actually, okay, yes, I see that. Right. Gosh, I'll have to find a place to put that after lunch. Yes, but it's a really good reminder, see? Yeah. Right.
Okay, anyway, I'm Dafford. How are you?
I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting via digital technology on the lands of the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded.
Okay, so I'm Dafford. How are you? Janice, is it?
Well, yes, of course it's Janice. It's always been Janice. And yes, thank you. And you are, let's have a look, Daffy D. Oh, Daffy? That can't be right. It's David, surely, isn't it?
No, it's actually, it's Dafford with an F, a Y and a double D.
Why?
Yes, that's right, a Y.
No, I mean, why? Why would you do that? I mean, it must make life very hard for you. I mean, goodness, you'll have people saying, that's not how you spell David, lol. I mean, it's so strange, it's weird.
Well, no, it's not strange, and no, it's not weird. It's actually Welsh. It means friend or darling.
Oh, well, we've actually only just met, you know, so I could hardly call you a friend. Now, a friend is someone that you can confide in, you know, someone that you can say, gosh, that tiger shirt does nothing for you. A friend is someone that you can knock back 10 or 12 Bacardi breezes and watch Tiger King 2. No, you are not that person, darling. Goodness. Anyway, I'm Janice Plackett, Senior Executive of the HR Department. Well, not that it's a department as such, it's more like a desk with a wonky leg, a broken stapler and some post-it notes, lol. But I'll be taking you through your induction here at Plug and Gamble Fitters and Turners, and we'll be doing the whole thing online, lol.
And my name's actually on the screen as well. It's right there, Janice, along with my pronouns.
Yes, Daffy D and heathen. Heathen? What's a heathen?
Well, they're my pronouns, Janice. He and them. It means I identify as a cisgendered man as well as a non-binary person.
Oh, yes. God, it's so confusing these days, isn't it? Lol. Although, where I get my hair done, Pam Panache Face and Fingers, she had an apprentice called Jamie who was a non-binary. And Pam said one day, it's a kind of a joke just to lighten the mood, you know, Pam introduced Jamie to a client as non-dairy. Well, there was such a fuss on the internet about poor old Pam's innocent joke that she went out of business. No one would go back there. I mean, she even apologised, she was crying and everything, but it's no good. She'd been cancelled. She now works at Bunnings in the storeroom, doesn't talk to a soul. It's like she's on mute, except 24/7, 7 days a week, and all through the night. I mean, it's such a shame.
That is outrageous.
I know. I mean, poor old Pam had been doing hair and fingers for over 30 years, and you couldn't go past her Thursday special, tint and a touch-up for 20. Now I've got to go to this really expensive place. It's handy, it's around the corner.
I think you were right before when you said we're not friends, Janice, and I don't think we're likely to be. There is so much wrong with that story you just told me. Pronouns aren't funny. They're actually how people want to be identified these days, and do you know what? We actually have every right to do that. And if your friend Pam Panache thought that pronouns were a joke, well, it was only a matter of time before she was out of a job.
Oh, those two. I've missed them. Now, whether or not we are actually living in an age of cancel culture, we are certainly living in an age of op-eds about cancel culture in the age. From the call-out culture of the Me Too movement in 2016 to a perpetual parade of straight white men saying it's political correctness gone mad, you can't say anything anymore, you can't call people mean names. Yeah, you can, you dickhead. The proponents of cancel culture believe it is a legitimate redress for racist, sexist, transphobic and homophobic comments and behaviour. Its critics think that the cancellers are just left-wing snowflakes who can't take a joke. Brent, do you, enjoying your tea there, do you think it's just a case of people not having a sense of humour?
I think I'm going to disagree with PDO on this, but I think it's about authenticity, again, against PDO there. But why not? I mean, why can't we be everyone we want to be? Why couldn't we be they, them, theirs, and more?
It's a very, I don't have a reason why not. You win. Cancel culture, of course, exists on the right side of politics as well. The Dixie Chicks, remember, they had to change their name to the Chicks and their careers were severely damaged after they criticised George Bush. Then, of course, there's cases like Israel Folau, who said on Instagram that got, we all know what he said. Ultimately, he was dropped by Rugby Australia for expressing those beliefs. Examples like this have led some people to call cancel culture consequence culture. Harriet, is losing one's job for offensive tweets or Facebook postings fair?
Well, I hope you haven't looked at my Twitter feed, because not only is there not terribly much interesting in there, but for boredom's sake, I might in fact find myself losing my job. But I would like to think that if we're talking about tweets or about Facebook, then we can also be talking about someone who should be losing their job for laying hands upon people after a bushfire and trying to get them to actually give it up for the cult of personality. And I would also say that if we're also talking about cancel culture, then Grace Tame has every right under her freedom of expression not to smile at someone who she considers to be a total dickhead. Allegedly.
I guess the theme of this evening is calling people dickheads. It does raise a good point. Janet, where does forgiveness and reform fit into this discussion?
I think that everybody has the right to call out bad behaviour and hold people accountable for the actions that they take and the words that they say and the harm that they cause because of that. So just saying that upright. But in my organisation, we work in men's behaviour change programs, and we spend a lot of time working with people so that they can change. So I believe that people can change. I believe that people can grow, and I have hope for everybody, no matter how hideous they are. So I do think that there should always be an opportunity for people to demonstrate that change and demonstrate that intention to change, and we should support people to make those changes. So otherwise, we wouldn't have an LGBTIQ community. We wouldn't have a movement. So, for example, a long time ago, in the dark ages, Jamie Gardner and I met with Victoria Police for about 13 what I would call first meetings, just to start start a communication to start to try and change the culture. And then what flowed from that is a whole lot of engagements. Now we've got a long way to go, but you've got to start somewhere, no matter how terrible the culture is that you're dealing with. So, and even the individuals and their views, because it comes down to, in my view, it comes down to relationships, and it comes down to really doing the hard work to educate and change people. So I have hope. I'll always have hope.
Good on you. You raised some really good points there. I think that it is really that thing of, it's a balance, isn't it? Now, free speech is a term that gets thrown around a lot. Jez, where do you think that freedom of speech fits in all of this conversation?
So I think freedom of speech fits in with this conversation in relation to, first of all, a fundamental right, but more to that, how freedom of speech actually is your vessel towards education. And I say this from the point of view, say, coming from my minority ethnic group, where cancel culture is highly prevalent in the context of fitting in with the dominant culture, in the context of the broader LGBTIQ plus community. And this happens more often than not in a very unconscious way. But for those of us who come from a community that's a minority, the freedom of speech that we express, even in the context of a committee, to express the fact that we need to have an ethnic LGBTIQ plus reference in this committee in order to be heard, in order for our cultural context to be recognized as part of our LGBTIQ plus reference, that is freedom of speech. And the recognition and the education that one receives within that committee in relation to this particular reference point in itself is enabling us to, first of all, assert our freedom of speech, and second of all, find that place of belonging and allow ourselves to take that journey of, where you fit in terms of that identity, because it is an evolving process. It is not set in stone.
Well said. Now, Renee, can we cancel everyone? What if they're really good on one issue, but not so good on everything else?
That's such a good question. I think cancel culture works, but this tool needs to be used with a discretion, because we all growing up in a different environments with different privileges. But at the same time, I believe that learning space should be a space where you can make a mistake and learn from this mistake. But here we need to hold ourselves accountable for this, and not to repeat this mistake again. But can we cancel everyone? I don't know. This year, for example, Midsummer Festival, they provided a space for Circo to be Circo and proud. But for those who doesn't know what a Circo is, it's a major game player who held detention centers in Australia and prisons as well. And it's multiple reports when detainees alleged workers who work in the detention center in the sexual assault, in the physical assault, and they're here, they're proud. And as well, in detention center in the Christmas Island, Australian Human Rights Commission, they found out that children that were held there in the Christmas Island, that it was in violation with international law. Mardi Gras, we provide the space to march Qantas, when Qantas deported refugees and LGBTIQ people back to these unsafe situations. Mardi Gras, last week, they voted against the motion of condemning bad treatment of asylum seekers and refugees and high death in custody. So I think we need to have these difficult conversations, and we need to create a space where everyone can feel welcome and safe, not just some people who have certain amount of education, class privilege, and we all want to be together, stronger community. But let's talk about this, and let's make a real change that everyone is welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I think it's time because it says so here. For Daffod and Janice to meet up again virtually. So, let's see what's going on. Or I can tell you about the sweetest little poodle. I'll tell you later.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Janice. You're on mute again. Just click unmute down at the bottom. See where the little microphone is. Unmute.
Oh, crumbs! You must have thought I was all palm and no boarding there for a minute. Oh, you'd think I would have gotten the hang of it by by now. Now, Dafford, there, I've got the hang of that. Yeah, although I almost called you Daffy for a moment there. Daffy! You know, like the duck.
Yes, don't do that, please, Janice. It's not like I haven't heard it before, but it's actually really offensive. You do get that, don't you?
Oh, I'm only joking, David. Where's your sense of humour? Somewhere in Wales. Lol. You know, if you had a normal name, then you wouldn't have this problem. Now, your induction. Have we done the respect and courtesy in the workplace bit?
No, I don't think we've quite covered that yet.
Okay. Well, here it is. Employees are expected to act in a courteous, respectful and patient manner at all times when dealing with other employees or clients. This includes physically striking, behaving threateningly, or using abusive language. Now, you got that?
Yeah, I'm quite interested in this part of the induction, Jan, because being gay,
Look, it's Janice, actually. I hate Jan. And as far as you being gay is concerned, look, thanks for sharing, but it is quite unnecessary. I mean, my daughter's a gay lesbian woman, so there's no problem at all with that with me. I mean, I love the gays. I watch RuPaul's Drag Race. I never miss an episode. And look at my post-it notes. A rainbow colour, see?
Oh, wonderful. Okay, I was just thinking more that I saw on the news that the government has brought in the religious discrimination bill, and you know, some gay people might not get hired in some jobs, and I just wondered, you know, if that means anything at Plug and Gamble Turners and Fitters.
Well, that's got nothing to do with us. We hire the gays, we don't care. We treat everyone the same. I mean, look at Nigel. Oh, well, you haven't met Nigel yet, have you? But he drives a forklift. But he's as calm as a royal rainbow dance. And he's a Scientologist, just like Tom Cruise. Can you believe it? I mean, he believes that we're all from outer space. What a fruitcake,
Yes, well, that is clearly insane. But no, I was thinking more about the other religious people at work and how that might impact me, you know, going forward.
Well, we don't have religious people at work. Well, oh, wait a minute. Yes, we do. Actually, there's Cheryl in accounts. Yeah, she's really into religion. Actually, come to think of it, last Christmas party, we had to bring a plate. I did a lovely pav with tinned pineapple chunks. It's a Nigella recipe, but she uses passion fruit, and I can't stand passion fruit, so I use tinned pineapple chunks. You just pour it all over. It works out beautiful. You should try it. Anyway, I was talking to Cheryl about Brianna, my daughter, and her wife Alice, and Cheryl came over all funny. And she said that although I must love Brianna as my child, she was sure that she and Alice were going to burn in hell for all eternity for their sin, which she called an abomination against God. Can you imagine? Brianna roasted on Satan's rotisserie. Lol, she would not like that. But really, I mean, it's just Cheryl's belief. She's actually a lovely person. The way she explained it, she loves the gay people, but she despises their sin. That's what she said. And then she bought a lovely savoury roll with peanuts and a dipping sauce and promised to give me the recipe. But strangely, we haven't spoken since then. And I remember emailing her about 5 times for that recipe. I even included a video of a cat, a cute cat video reading the news while sitting on a pizza in space. Oh, it was really fun.
We've all met Janice. Janice has given us a lot to think about here. So it's true that Scott Morrison has introduced a religious discrimination bill into Parliament, and people within the LGBTQI plus community, like Anna Brown, have voiced concerns that the inclusion of a clause that allows statements of belief is problematic, to say the least. Ghassan, is there cause for concern here?
Yes, because the bill does more than just give people of faith the same protection as everyone else. It actually winds back protections that we have, so people can say offensive things to you in your workplace, when you see the doctor, at school, and what was discrimination before could now be lawful treatment in those settings.
Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
I wanted to say that I think that I want to talk about that, how brave I actually found him in that discussion. Like, as a trans person, it would be very hard in the induction to speak back as much as he did. And I think that's what this is about, whether it's cancel culture or religious discrimination bill. We've got to talk about power and like who's holding it and how do we actually deal with equity within the context power, and that's what systematic reform is about. But I think that, yeah, like I found the way that he actually tried to bring up issues about his own identity extremely brave, and I think Janet's actually gone very back in time. I thought she had come a long way, but that's probably because at her workplace they hadn't done ongoing training around LGBTI, or maybe they didn't have a rainbow tick, so therefore they didn't have any accountability around whether people were actually subscribing to the training or not. So I've got some feedback for sure to that workplace. But I think actually it's really important for workplaces. You know, I'm an employer. Lots of people here are employers on the panel, and like, you know, we have to actually stand up against the religious discrimination bill as people who employ people, and we can't take the rhetoric that it is about equity, because for the reasons that Ghassan said so clearly. But I think that if people aren't involved in this campaign, it's very hard to get it to feel like we can rally ourselves again for another campaign, particularly within the context of COVID. But I really encourage people, Equality Australia are doing a great job, and people should really, and other organisations need to really find out about this. And I think, personally, and I'm going to say something controversial here because that's the theme of the night, is I don't think if the prize for marriage equality or the cost of marriage equality is that we get the religious discrimination bill, I think that as a prize we would never have wanted to pay. And that's what I leave you with tonight. And that's the fight we must bring to this.
I saw you, Dylan, nodding along to that. I feel like you've got something to add as well.
I don't really think I have anything to add to that.
Sure.
I do. Look, I actually agree so much. You know, I think marriage equality, it was not the end. That was, you know, what did they say? It was a battle that was won, but it wasn't the war by any means. And I think what we see happening in Australia, what we see happening overseas, specifically to our youth, is what terrifies me. They're using young people, the whole thing that happened with the Christian whatever school in Queensland, they're using young people as weapons to invalidate themselves, so invalidating the young people. And it is just the most, in my mind, the most abhorrent thing to do, using children to further your fanatical beliefs. And if anyone thought that marriage equality was going to solve all these problems, I'm so super fucking sorry for them.
Yeah, I think some really good... Yeah. I think there's some really interesting points about this idea of respectability and sort of, if we're polite and nice enough, we'll earn our rights. Now, last year, Harriet, you made an impassioned speech in Parliament saying, and I'm going to read out your own words, I apologise. I hope that I
Can
hope I
you
do it
cry
justice.
at the same time as well? Because I think that's 10.
I'm a comedian, not an actor.
Do it.
Okay. But if anyone is holding auditions, I'm really interested in TV work. So this is your words. For our entire lives, we're told that we are different, and we're told in too many cases that the difference is unacceptable and that therefore we should not be entitled to be treated in the same way as others, that we represent something bad and nasty. And I hear people say we respect and admire and love and include LGBTIQA plus people, but, and there's always a but, there's always a reason in the name of political discourse to say that we're a really, really great part of the world, but we continue to lose our families, we lose access to support, we lose a seat at the table in so many important ways. Harriet, I hope that I did your words justice there. Is this still the case? And what would you say to people who will only support us conditionally?
Firstly, I think it sounded better when you said it, so thank you for reading my words back to me. I think it is actually something that is an incredibly difficult conversation to have with people who just don't get it. It is very, very easy from the perspective of to take the archetype, a straight, white, middle class bloke usually who's neurotypical and non-disabled, to talk about how there aren't actually any problems. Privilege is blind. And the systems and the rules and the situations of power that Joe has referred to earlier are the ones which operate to the detriment of people across so many different cohorts, and that includes LGBTIQA+ folk like us. It also includes, to go to the point that was raised earlier around intersectionality, it includes and it disproportionately damages and hurts and injures and causes disadvantage to the lives of people who live within various intersections of our communities. And to that end, we are faced with the constant uphill battle of needing to scream our disadvantage into what often feels like space or a black hole, and to say it time and time and time and time again, whereupon we become known for only ever talking about being LGBTIQ+, or indeed from a multicultural background, or from a regional background, or from whatever background it is that makes up this constellation of who we are. The way to get decision makers to listen is to change the profile of decision makers, and it's to disrupt and to change the profile of the people who hold the pens and who hold the checkbooks and who write the legislation. And that's why visibility is so important, and that's why representation is so important, and that's why when we have these conversations about marriage equality that start as a great movement that brings in so many people who might not otherwise have engaged with disadvantage and with discrimination, we need to continue that conversation to say, how do we make our parliaments more equal? Why is it that, and I say this and I cry a lot in Parliament, why am I always the one person standing up and talking from a first person perspective when other people around me are saying there is no problem? It's incumbent upon me, and I hope more people, as they are elected to Parliament from our communities, to stand up and say, actually, you're talking about me, and I'm the face for the voice of people who are voiceless because of the systems that you insist upon perpetuating because, as I said, privilege is blind. So the short answer to that, because I'm a politician and I can't actually give a short answer to anything, is yes, absolutely.
So people, did you hear her? You've got to stand. You've got to stand Parliament. We need more people in Parliament.
Get into your boardroom, stand for local government.
Join a party. We don't care which one. Actually, we do care. But join a party and stand for Parliament. We need more people.
You heard that, everyone. It's party time. I'm sorry. It's just... It's inbuilt, it's a problem. Jasmine, now you were talking a little bit about those sort of constellations of intersectionalities before. Have you ever faced in the work that you do that Harriet's mentioned, or that concept of conditional support, and what does that look like?
That's a really interesting, I think, observation in terms of the support that you receive. And I think the support you receive sometimes is dependent on you, in the sense that how do you advocate for yourself and the others like you in the context of that situation. If you take, for example, since you talked about the current bill, the religious discrimination bill that's out there, let's talk about that. Some of the reference to that bill is about preference, is about kind of preferencing the fact that we seem to be discriminated on the context of the reference to religion and the way in which it is constructed. It seems to be that they need to have a preferential treatment in the context of being not being discriminatory, which is rather odd, because when you look at the bill in itself, it comes from the external powers provisions of the Constitution, the way it's brought about. And one of the things that's really surprising, I find, in relation to the bill, is that it almost seems like what we call a special measure. So special measures in law are usually used for the benefit of the community as such. But in this context, you're kind of almost sort of implying that this preferential treatment needs to be provided in order to justify your discrimination. So the support that one needs to really have in this instance is what we are doing now, rejecting it. Now, it's going through the third time, so that's hopefully it's not 3 times lucky in terms of where this bill is coming from. But I think the support from community and who's advocating for this in relation to, the fact that this is the way forward in relation to dealing with religious discrimination. It is a particular cohort. And for my community, what I like to say is that this creates almost what I call in India in the days a caste system. The caste system that you are not good enough. And when Gandhi responded to that, what did he do? He allowed all the different religious organizations to come forward. So there's no sense of discrimination in the context of all the different people from different castes that require that support. So I'd advocate to go back to basic principles in terms of how you gain support. You first start by advocating for it, build the support structures around you, and allow that to be part of the education that rejects what is happening to us today.
Great answer. You're all smashing it. Look at them, so clever. All right, back to Plug and Gamble, Turners and Fitters. Joe's got notes about the organisation, and I'm not sure Daffod's going to carve out a career there, but let's check out how the induction's going.
And they've got to pay me if I'm going to consult.
That is absolutely fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not doing this for free anymore.
Do I have to tell you about my poodle?
You know that poodles, aren't they supposed to be the most intelligent dog?
They are supposed to.
Yeah.
Oh, aren't you clever, making your own sign like that? I can see you're very creative. So many of you people are like that, aren't you? Now let's see. We've got your tax file number, we've got your driver's licence, we've got your crim check, nothing turned up there. Whoa! Now it's time to learn a little bit about you. So what can you tell me about Daffy?
Me?
Yes, I always think it's a good idea to find out about who you work with because I'm actually curious about people. I mean, people are a little bit of a hobby of mine, actually.
Okay, I'm 32 and I'm an Aquarius with a Scorpio rising.
No, you're not. Oh my God, so am I. Oh my God, I just knew I sensed that we would have a lot in common. Oh my God, yeah, I felt a connection. You know, because I've always been a very mystical person, even when I was a little kiddie. Now, do you believe in past lives? I do, I really do. I was visiting the memorial for Simpson and his donkey, you know, the explorer, and I stood in front of the memorial stone and I got such strong donkey vibes and a strong donkey odour too, because that's how my psychic ability works. It's olfactory. And it was that spooky. I just sit down and calm myself. But I've always felt close to animals, and there's a reason for that. It's past lives. I had a budgie once, Gavin, and we could communicate, you know, psychically. He was so sensitive. He understood me on a very deep level. And one day when I was on the toilet, I heard this almighty screech.
Weren't you asking me about me, Janice? So, lol?
Oh, yes, sorry. I got carried away there for a moment, lol. Yes, you. Budgies. Do you have a budgie? Because I had a budgie called Gavin.
No, Janice, I don't have a budgie. Never had one. I think they're creepy.
Creepy. Interesting.
And horoscopes and budgies aside, I'm a keen bushwalker. I love cooking and indoor plants. I love competitive Scrabble, competitive table tennis, competitive, well, anything really. I'm actually quite competitive, but in a good way. Or I auditioned for The Voice.
He did not!
Oh, did you watch it?
No.
Oh, well, I got eliminated straight away in the first round. I rocked a retro vibe with Islands in the Stream, but yeah, these didn't get it. What else? I'm just coming out of a long-term relationship, and at home I'm mostly a nudist, which makes this working from home thing actually quite challenging and confronting.
Excuse me. Islands in the Stream? Hello? I'm a Kenny and Dolly fan too. Oh, and I'm sorry to hear about your relationship.
Oh, yeah, well, we've been together about 5 years, and then he started volunteering at Thorne Harbour, and, I was just like he had no time there for me.
Thorne Harbour, now I've heard of that. Don't tell me. Is that like Bed, Bath and Table?
Sort of. But Thorne Harbour, well, it used to be the AIDS Council.
AIDS? Is there a council for AIDS?
Yeah, but, no one really gets AIDS anymore, so it's so last century. So I was in that for a while, but that's kind of sorted now. So I'm focusing more on the climate.
Bit of a stumble there from Dafford. So, Janet Jukes, we've never had so many ways for people to prevent HIV. There's condoms, there's PrEP, there's PEP and undetectable viral load. So why is HIV and AIDS not over, given all of the advances that we've made?
Well, firstly, it's not true that no one gets AIDS anymore. Sadly, people do still become HIV positive in Australia. So why isn't it over? Because we haven't invested and we haven't decided to do it. I think, if we saw the amount of world effort that we're seeing with COVID applied to HIV, I think we'd probably be pretty close to eliminating any new transmissions at least, and be a long way down the line on finding a cure. But in Australia, it's certainly within our reach to see no new transmissions of HIV, and that's we've got treatments now, pre and post prophylactic treatments that can prevent. Can mean that you have no undetectable viral load, which means you can't transmit HIV to anybody else. So it's within our reach. As Simon says, if we gave everybody a rapid HIV test when we do our rapid COVID tests, then we would eliminate HIV in Australia. So it's within our reach. It requires political will and a bit of investment. And I think that we're actually really in a very difficult point in the pandemic at the moment, at least in Australia, the epidemic in Australia, because there is a sense both within our community and within the broader community that it's over, and it really isn't. And if we take our foot off the accelerator right now, then we could find ourselves in a very terrible situation.
Much like that religious discrimination bill. It's a full-time job being queer, isn't it?
Or working with Victoria Police too. You can't take your eye off the ball because it goes backwards, I'm afraid to say. So, you've got to keep working on it all the time.
So very true. Now, given how far we've come, Brent, is stigma still real for people living with HIV? And if so, how do we counter this?
I think I just want to respond to something Janet said first, and that is that, eliminating new infections in Australia through biotechnical means is fantastic. However, there still are over 26,000 of us living with HIV in Australia, so it doesn't make any difference if we end new transmissions. There are tens of thousands of us living in this country, and there are hundreds of thousands of us living at the doorstep of this country, and millions of us around the world. So ending HIV is not about just ending new transmissions. Ending HIV is about finding a cure. And we've seen, I have to say, what you can do when the world mobilizes and everyone focuses their efforts. And we saw that with COVID and what they've done with the vaccine. It breaks my heart to think that we don't have the political will, we don't have the emphasis to end a disease that has plagued our community for so long. I think that the stigma we live with as people living with HIV hasn't gone away. Has it got better? Maybe. I think U = U has made a radical difference, but it's still here. And if you just itch that tiny scab, it gushes blood. Just before I came here, I was embroiled in a debate about why gay men who continue to fuck without condoms are the problem, and why U equals U is not the solution. And I'm thinking to myself, well, yes, but no, but let's just make treatment available to everyone, regardless. I mean, I loved what the government did at World AIDS Day and announced that, you know, Medicare ineligibles finally in this country can get antiretroviral treatment. But how long did that take? And why aren't we focusing on a cure? Oh, now I'm going to start thumping the table. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on that.
Absolutely, and I think that sense, the stigma is such a huge player in that, where it's, you know, when we talk about the difference between, you know, the response to COVID and the response to HIV and AIDS, that it is about that kind of that stigma. Is a big part.
Can I just respond really quickly? Sorry, I know I'm starting to debate. I absolutely agree with you, Brent. I think that, you know, we need to be working on a cure. And I think the other thing one of the things that I reflected on as we commemorated 40 years of HIV this year at World AIDS Day was that it's taken us 40 years to get to where we've got in about a year and a half with COVID, because of partly because of all of the work that's been done with HIV. And the reason that a lot of the science and the response is because of HIV. And I actually think that it's about investment, it's about political will, but it is also about stigma. And the reason we don't have the investment and the political will is because of the stigma.
Absolutely. It goes to what you're saying around intersectionality. Because the people who are getting HIV are not the polite white gay guys anymore. They're the ones who are on the fringes of our society, who we continue to make homeless, who we continue to force drugs on. I mean, HIV has been the mirror, the background to COVID this whole time. You know, COVID is simply following a well-trodden path. And I think we have to step back and say, if we have the political will, but we actually care about those who are marginalized and those who are vulnerable, then we will invest in them more than the white cis gay guys.
I actually also think it's worth noting that there's a selective engagement on issues of public health that I think has never before been so galling than as to look at comments such as, this is the worst pandemic we've ever seen, and in fact taking the benefit of African public health systems across African nations that have become so good at test, trace, isolate and programs of assistance because they had to, because governments around the world have turned a blind eye to sending investment and funding to a continent whose populations have been crippled and devastated, and whose the lives of people in really vulnerable situations in regional and rural areas in particular have been wrecked. And you don't see that happening with a pandemic response involving COVID-19, but what you do see is governments from OECD nations, from everywhere you can imagine, where people are rich and have money in their budgets to be able to spend on rapid health response, calling upon a continent which has had to evolve on the smell of an oily rag to take the benefit of all of that information and that knowledge and that practice, to simply import it and put it into a place where we have the money for tests, for vaccinations and for the healthcare that makes a fundamental difference for those in need, those in hospitals, those on ventilators. And this is the wake-up call that governments have now as an opportunity for them to take up. Whether that happens or not will, I think, be in large part an answer to the question about the ongoing presence of stigma and just how disgraceful it is.
And speaking of stigma, Dylan, I'm sure that you've got some points on, surely stigma doesn't have a role to play in sex work.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot while people have been speaking, and I guess something I'm thinking about is, we can talk about what happens at a governmental level, but I guess in terms of what happens in our own communities, and I think about some of the, I guess this, really the sense of betrayal that like sex workers and trans people often feel within, you know, within the queer community or the trans community. And I know we're not the only, you know, we're not the only people within our community to have those experiences. I mean, if we're talking about HIV, I think about the fact that, you know, there was a real lost opportunity in terms of legislative change in Victoria, which I do think comes from stigma, you know. The continued criminalisation of sex workers living with HIV. I think a lot of people just simply choose to pretend that's not still an issue. All things going well, not an issue for too much longer. Hi Fiona. But yeah, you know, as a trans person and as someone who's, you know, spent a lot of my time not just doing sex work, but doing sex work that is not considered respectable. Like, it's not the fantasy that people have of making stacks of money. I'm talking about, you know, having sex for $60 or something. Like, that stigma works its way into you, it works its way into your body, and it's something that I think as people trying to be in community with each other, we have to think about really hard. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this actually, but I guess that would be the kind of the invitation I would offer is, what do we do in our own, like what do we do to clean up our own house while we're trying to organise as a community for change? And I would encourage people who aren't part of, for example, sex worker community to look at what sex workers do around the world, because we're really good at it, I'll just say. You know, trans people are really good at it. Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity at the moment, and I think it would be really unfortunate to see people in our communities kind of let that go in the name of respectability and kind of incremental progress.
Yeah, and with so many of these important, you know, these important issues that we're talking about here, but also other issues kind of competing for people's attention, how do, you know, like the climate, for instance, how do we prioritise or give space to LGBTQI issues like HIV in the hearts and minds of our communities? Yes, right?
Well, I don't think it's an either or, because you need a climate to live in so that you can actually build a community that looks after each other. And there's been a lot said, but let's not forget the community actually got us to where we got to on HIV and on COVID. So we can, you know, ask for money from governments, but the funding only goes so far, because actually it's the collective effort of the people who've come before and the people who have come after that moves us towards the response that we want to build for ourselves. And you know, in my work, I hear so many people that are still getting discriminated against on the basis of their sexuality, on the basis of their gender identity, intersex kids that are still getting treatment before they can consent, before they can even speak, that's affecting their bodies in ways that they don't get any say over. And all of that, we're not in this post-marriage equality world. We're in two lanes, and there's some that get the enjoyment of those rights, and then there's some that don't even know those rights exist, and then there's some that are still waiting for the rights. So I think hearing what is said, the importance is remembering our power and remembering that collectively I'm really proud of the response we've had to HIV. We wouldn't be today, I think, were it not for that collective effort. Organisations like Thorne Harbour wouldn't exist were it not for, we just picked ourselves up. And frankly, it comes back to really one thing, and that's sex. Society still has a problem talking about sex, dealing with our bodies, dealing with our sexual lives, our gender, and the way that expectations about the way you present yourself in the world or live in the world is received. And it's also the religious discrimination bill, because it's about organisations that want to put us in sexed boxes, and the more control over, what we should think, the kind of institutions we should be allowed to be employed in. Just this week, I heard from parents who were at that school, and they're outraged, not because they're gay, but because they're Christians, and those institutions are not speaking for themselves. So I think there's a lot about us taking back power and not giving up the power to assume that the government speaks for us or these institutions speak for us. And we speak for ourselves and bring it together ourselves and find the solutions.
Now, Joe.
I want to say about, because this is really important to what the last 2 years have been for me, like running Switchboard and leading Switchboard, is this is no exaggeration that every day when I went to work in the early days of COVID, I thought of HIV/AIDS activists. I thought of ACT UP. Because they're the people that got me up in the morning. Because I thought about what I had, the government response, the funding, the organisational structure, a range of public health measures. I had all these things, and many of you in this audience, you didn't have that. And if you could do what you did, keeping each other safe, then I could get up and run a mental health organisation, and we could sit at the end of a phone and take those phone calls like we did 30 years ago. 30 years ago when we started Switchboard, many of those people were some of our volunteers are in our early newsletters, and they died. They came to volunteering, like they did volunteer at the Victorian AIDS Council then. They volunteered even when they were sick, because of the community mindedness they'd had. And it's their spirit, it's your spirit, you as the survivors, it's the spirit of the organisations that get me up every day. And when I went and got vaccinated, I wore my Keith Haring shirt. Probably should have worn my Thorne Harbour one, but I'd grown out of it. But I wore my Keith Haring shirt because I wanted to remember and centre that there was no vaccination for AIDS in the 80s. And I wanted to remember what that would have, to take that into that space of what people didn't have. And I wanted to say, if you are one of those people that fought, you were there, I am so grateful, and you inspire me every single day, and you inspire the COVID response, and we would all be so much better if the HIV response had been more centred in the COVID response, around stigma, how we treated people who got positive. We put them on the front page of papers. Didn't we learn that from HIV? We stigmatised people that were positive so they wouldn't come forward and report. We learnt not enough. And so your voices need to be heard more and more, and thank you.
Well, Joe just somehow psychically answered the question that was written on this card without me asking it. So it's back to Janice and Dafford, whose weekly Zoom meetings continue.
Can I jump on and say something,
sure.
To add something I think very important. I'm really grateful for all HIV activists who did their job, but let's remember that people of colour start getting treatment the last. And how you said before that the COVID situation was a mirror with what happened with HIV and AIDS. And during this pandemic, asylum seekers suffered the most. They lost all support. And I have people who skip the meals on our backyard. Thank you. We can continue.
Jump on in. Janice and Dafford can wait. They're not real. All right. So their weekly, our not real friends, their weekly Zoom meetings continue when Janice receives a surprising phone call from my poodle. It's really full. It's quite full on, raising a.
Oh, you're joking! Oh, Brianna, no! This can't be true. But how does this work? Well, I'm used to you being a lesbian woman. You can't just change that after everything I've been through. I've ordered the cake for your anniversary. It says happy anniversary, Brianna and Alice. I can't get them to scrape the icing off now. I look like an idiot. What? No, I'm just about to do a Zoom meeting with this new guy. It's okay, I'm on mute. But look, I'll call you later, but we'll try and sort this out then. Look, I'm really annoyed, Brianna.
Poodle's right. No, it is quite full on raising a puppy. It's like raising a baby. Don't say that to someone who has a baby, they don't like it. I said that to my sister, who has a newborn, and she was like, see, I've got a whole bit about it. She was like, well, it's not the same, Zoe. You don't have to feed him from your body, which is true. We don't have to do that. That is a choice. Breast is best. We don't want him getting asthma. I'll go on. Don't wait for me. We did want to get a rescue, but it was really difficult because they're in such high demand. So in the end, we had to get a surrogate. What else? Oh, my partner and I... You're not waiting for me, are you, up there? No, just give me the... Yep, great, cool. Okay, so I am just going to tell you about my fucking poodle. All right, we're close. Just wave when we're ready to go, and I'll just keep talking about the poodle. This is true, and I think that you all need to know it. My partner and I, there are complex relationship, issues in a queer relationship, as we've been talking about today. Many important issues. What? Yeah.
Yeah.
I have called you guys, actually.
Yeah.
On there for hours. Our biggest issue is that my partner decided... I didn't know this was going to be an issue. My partner gave the toilet commander voice, and it's a baby voice. Oh, no. And I didn't know that she was doing this until it was too late. And so now our dog will only go to the toilet. He'll go if he really needs to go, but if you want him to go, when you want him to go, you have to go toilet. Go toilet. And I'm really mad about it. We had a proper fight about it because I didn't know that we were picking a character. And if I had, I would have picked a better character, like a straight girl at a hen's party or something. Because that would be go toilet. It's way better. Oh, go toilet.
Did you enter him in the best dog in show competition at Midsummer? Because that's always an extravaganza of the best dogs going around.
But now you're going to tell us where you're from, aren't you?
What?
Oh, wait, you're from Sydney.
You know my gear.
That's because the Midsummer.
Yeah, no, okay, so everyone needs to enter their dogs into best dog in show.
I didn't know.
There's usually about 940 greyhounds, and then there's a Pomeranian, right, and someone brings a French bulldog, and all of the greyhound people form this massive clique, like disclosure, massive greyhound, person over here. But,
and then they race them?
Sorry?
I said... Because I reckon those things could go so fast.
They're super dumb, right? So where your poodle needs a specific accent and inflection in order to have a dump, a greyhound just goes, I've got enormous thighs and I've never missed an arm day and I don't actually know my own name, right? So they don't really care. So, it's a good thing, and I'd just give a bit of a shout out for people to adopt a greyhound if you can, because they race, but they don't really like to do it that long, and after about 45 seconds they'll need to spend 22 hours upside down on the couch, which is kind of like me after a walk. So if you're in the market, there's lots of them there and you should get amongst it. They're pointy and they're amazing, and they won't eat your poodle.
I love this. Anyone else got any dog gear?
I adopted the puppy just this Sunday, and she's deaf, so now we're learning sign language to explain her how to go to the toilet.
Oh, that's adorable.
They do actually respond to body language more than words, so that's...
Sign language in a baby voice, that's what you need to do.
Yeah. I think that's a face, isn't it? We've got so close there.
It's taken a very particular turn.
What's happening? No?
How's your wine going? Your tea going, Brent?
Cool.
It's actually...
Can I ask, does Mardi Gras have a dog show?
I think Fair Day has a dog show.
Yeah. I just felt like you didn't know the lingo. That's why I said you're from Sydney. I didn't mean to actually sort of out you.
No, it's fine. I'm from Sydney, everyone. But I live here now.
I didn't even know.
I do.
I'll
get this. I moved to Sydney. My partner and I moved to Sydney in March of 2020.
Oh, that's why I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's why I had no idea.
So we've lived in Sydney for about 15 years, but I think somehow we've lived in Melbourne longer.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was so sure you wouldn't know what the dog show was. That's how parochial I was. Like,
they have dog shows in Sydney. That's not like a local Melbourne term.
Not like this dog show they don't.
Exactly.
There's the longest tail subset of the competition. Like, this is why the greyhounds always smash it, right? When it comes down to nuts and bolts, a Chihuahua is never going to be able to compete with something whose tail needs its own like postcode. What?
Oh, you're joking!
Yay!
Oh, Brianna, no! This can't be true. But how does this work? Well, I'm used to you being a lesbian woman. You can't just change that after everything I've been through. I've ordered the cake for your anniversary. It says happy anniversary, Brianna and Alice. I can't get them to scrape the icing off now. I look like an idiot. What? No, I'm just about to do a Zoom meeting with this new guy. It's okay, I'm on mute. But look, I'll call you later, but we'll try and sort this out then. Look, I'm really annoyed, Brianna. I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm at 6s and 7s this morning. I'm just a bit flustered at TM. Now, where were we?
Sounds like you've got a lot going on. Are you okay?
To BH, I'm a bit annoyed and confused, actually. Yes.
Well, what's going on?
Well, look, if I could just take my professional hat off for a moment, if you don't mind, I'd like to share something with you. About 2 years ago, my daughter Brianna married this lovely girl, Alice. Now, Alice is quite high up in the barista trade. She does demonstrations and everything. She won an international award for a big prize for her rendering of The Last Supper, which was done on top of a soy latte mochaccino. It was just amazing. Actually, I've got a photo of it here somewhere.
No, that's okay, Janice. There's some issue with the anniversary? That's what I heard you saying.
Yes. Oh, gosh, help! Thank you for reminding me. Well, the problem is that it's Brianna and Alice's anniversary next week, and I've ordered a cake, beautiful cake. It's a rainbow sponge, and they've done a gorgeous job of it. I mean, I'm not a fan of sponge cake myself. I think it's like eating cotton wool. But Brianna likes it, and that's the main thing, so that's what I've done. I mean, personally, I like a fruit cake, because you can't go wrong with a fruit cake. I think there's something in there for everyone, you know, but no, as it turns out, Alice is now transitioning, and from now on wants to be known as Alan, which, you know, I mean, it's don't get me wrong, I'm happy for Alan. I've learned all about transitioning journeys at PFLAG, but that's just it. I can't go to PFLAG anymore because Brianna won't be a lesbian anymore because she's married to Alan, because he's a man. So, I mean, it's been such a steep learning curve for me over the last few years, and now this. Brianna will become a heterosexual, a cisgendered, heterosexual married woman. So I think you can see the problem, Darren. And on top of all of that, there's the rainbow sponge.
So, Janice is confused and Alan is transitioning. Dylan, how does one reconcile conflicts in queer identities as one transitions?
A big question.
It is.
I don't know, as I was watching that, I was definitely reflecting on a couple of conversations, hope my mother's not watching this, with my mother, when I started this phase of my transition. And experience I have a lot of the time is that people don't know what my gender is. People know that I'm trans. They don't know what kind of trans I am. They don't know which direction it's going in or if there's a direction or what it is. And I don't actually do a lot to help people out with that very much these days because I quite enjoy the confusion. But also, I guess for me, you know, ambiguity is actually, you know, it's my most kind of affirming state, I guess, in terms of gender. But I think often when other people are confused, the secret is I don't really know what's going on either. You know, it's question mark, question mark, question mark. And I guess, yeah, you know, I think change is hard for people, right? It's hard to adjust. If a friend or a family member is someone you have a particular idea of, and then suddenly that idea is kind of disrupted for some reason, I think that is really confronting to people. But I think, this is kind of similar to what I said before actually. For me, the answer really does just lie in being in community with other people. Other trans people have taught me how to exist as a trans person, and still do. And so I think it's okay to have some awkward conversations, hopefully not as awkward as that one we just watched, but for me, what happened was I had a few of those conversations with family members, and eventually they got to a point where they understood that there was a choice between, being in my life or not being in my life. And when that choice was presented really clearly, they were able to become a lot less confused really, really fast. So I think, I think it's just about finding ways to be firm within yourself. But ultimately to be in solidarity and in community with other queer and trans people, to me, that and other sex workers, for me, is like trans sex workers specifically is where that comes from.
Yeah, and I think that thing that you is so difficult to articulate is that existing in ambiguity as well, without trying to put labels on things. Labels can be helpful, but also, a hindrance. So, speaking of labels, Joe, is Brianna still a lesbian if she's in a relationship with a trans man?
It's up to her, isn't it? I think that we can all relate to this as LGBTIQA plus people in one way or another. It's like the age-old question, isn't it? Like, are you a gay man if you're not in a relationship with a man? Well, that's up to you, isn't it? Like, I think those questions are... we used to sort of say, like, how can you know that you're gay unless you've had gay sex, right? Like, there used to be sort of things we'd say, and now we just say it's actually an identity in its own right. It's not just about activity. For some people, it is about activity, but some people, it is actually about a culture and an identity. And I think that if Alice wants to have a relationship with a trans man and still identify as a lesbian, then she would join a large community of people who identify that way. However, I think also if she wants to, and I think these are dialogues that happen within the trans community that are really loaded, because sometimes partners, and we need more support around partners, I think, because sometimes trans people can want their partners to identify particular ways to help set up their relationship, if you like, and that's been something that's that can happen, and I think we need to have more spaces for communication. I think that, I do want to say to Janice, because we'll interact with the video, but Janice, why did she tell a random co-worker, right? Like, that's not what we do for trans people. We don't randomly out them, right? That same thing that we know about outing is still the same for trans people today. What we learned, we allow people to have private lives. She was telling her mum, Brianna was telling her mum quite a private thing that someone had just found out about themselves. It was a private conversation. So that should have never happened. And probably if David, even though he's in a position of sort of subordination to Janet, if he was a good ally, he might have said, look, this is actually none of my business. He was a bit too curious. And I think we can be very curious about people's gender and genitals and sex life. And I think that we have to recognise the boundaries, that we don't always have to know everything. We need to listen to the information that people want to put out about themselves, whether that's being transgender, a positive, a range of, a person with a disability, a sex worker. These are all things that we might feel proud about, but they are also things that we are entitled to feel private about and to not share with everyone. So I think in that kind of scenario, and I think to Janice, I'd say, I guess I don't answer the phones at Switchboard, and the staff would do a better job of this than me. But Daffod, you should call somebody and have a chat, because it's not Brianna's responsibility to kind of work through that. They can have a conversation, but I think Janet needs to do a little bit of work, her own work. She seems like she's open to it, because she went to PFLAG. So she's got an openness to it. She's not adverse to it. So I think the next step is maybe talking to parents of gender diverse kids, Transcend. There's a whole range of organisations now that are set up to support trans parents, and I think I'd sort of empowered Dafford to maybe start volunteering at Thorne Harbour, like his ex-partner who left him, and then he could find a bit more. Anyway, he might find a new relationship, all sorts of things. I'd encourage him to find out a bit more about his community so he can be a better ally in that scenario, and they can all have some workplace training, and that's an ideal world that we all hope for, right? But that's just my thoughts on it.
I feel like next year at the Hypotheticals, you'll be in the video. All right.
Telling everyone what to do. Is that what you think my character is?
You'll just be, like a friend. It'll be, or maybe you'll be like a little icon, like Ask Jeeves.
You're like the paperclip from Microsoft Word back in about 1997.
I've got some organisations you can get in contact with.
And I just think that trans people can trans people in a relationship with a lesbian can still enjoy a rainbow fruitcake. That's my final point.
This is true. Harriet, how might Alan be received by some in the lesbian community?
Okay, so I've got some views on this, and I've been making these views pretty well known for quite some time, and I'm very happy to engage on the topic of trans men being men and trans women being women, and the fact that I have no bandwidth whatsoever for the trans exclusionary radical feminist part of our communities. I was appalled when I saw the conduct of certain members of the lesbian community weaponise the transphobic position at Mardi Gras to take over at the front of the line and to cause an enormous amount of humiliation and distress for members of our trans community. I think that it's not just the lesbian community, however, which needs to lift our game. I think that we have, for too long, let down our trans brothers and sisters. I think that we have been willfully blind to the very particular species of hurt and distress and discrimination and vilification and violence and injury and death which is sustained by our trans brothers and sisters. I think that we need to be very inclusive, that's the word I'm looking for, of the T in LGBTIQ, A+. And I think also that we've not done the right thing, not just our lesbian community, but the whole spectrum of our rainbow communities by our intersex communities as well. And to that end, I think that any civil rights movement, whilst looking outward to the changes that we want to see in the world around us and the better decisions that we want to encourage from governments and from organisations and from the corporate space, including as we work to influence those decisions by being in the mix of them, needs to be able to be honest enough to turn the same lens on ourselves and to acknowledge that there are a lot of things that we still don't get right, that our brother boys and sister girls, that our intersex folk, that our trans folk in everything from early learning right through to aged care don't get the dignity and the empathy and the engagement and the equity of opportunity that we've fought so hard for in the L bit, that everyone else fights for on their own playing fields. That marriage equality brought us together, albeit briefly, in one particular battle, like Game of Thrones, where you see the cavalry come over the hill and everyone goes, let's get the White Walkers, right? Can you tell that that was a lockdown thing for me? I went through all of the episodes and wow, it's harrowing when you binge watch it. But there's a lot going on. But I think that since marriage equality, since that postal survey, that shit experience that we all went through, we've almost gone our separate ways again and focused on the things that we see as priorities within the subset letters of our communities. I think we have a lot to do within the L community, but more broadly, to make sure that people like Alan, that people like the daughter,
Brianna.
And that people like Janice and Daffod have the opportunity to learn and to be listened to and to be respected in equal measure as part of what we see as progression that brings everybody along.
Right. It's also okay if I forget their names, by the way. They're not real.
Sorry, what did you just say?
It's okay if you forget their names.
Oh, I thought you were right. They're real to me. It's been how many hypotheticals now? We've seen their evolution over time.
It's true.
But to Harriet's point, it's not just work. It's actually, I've been really privileged to have worked with a lot of trans people over the 3 years or so that I've been in this role. And actually, they have taught me a lot and inspired me and enlarged my way of thinking. So we have more to learn for ourselves that is positive. So it's not just a deficit, right?
No, you're right.
We're actually enlarged the world for everybody by looking at the bravery of taking that step forward as yourself, which we have a similar experience in a different way. If you grew up in a school, for example, where you were the more effeminate boy or you were the sporty girl and you knew how brave it was to play with norms around gender in a way that you weren't expecting to. So it's often framed as, like the work that we have to do to be better, but actually that work is a joy because it opens up our opportunity for a better life for ourselves as well, not just for our trans colleagues and our trans peers and community members, but actually for all of us.
Bring it back to me or to us. I think the other side of that is that the gains that we make, if we make it for cisgendered, same-sex attracted people, then that's a very small foothold on that change until we bring along everybody.
Yep.
And so it's not real change. It's not real. So, marriage equality without discrimination protections, marriage equality without protections against protections for trans young people in school or people who work in faith-based organisations such as myself. It's not real. That gain is not real until we are able to achieve those gains for everybody. And so just in a totally, I absolutely agree with your point, and I can name some people who've been, incredibly patient with me and educating me through my life. But I think that we can't stop until everybody in our community has the same protections and opportunities.
Yeah, and is it bringing people along though, or is it about others catching up with those of us, like for example, trans people, sex workers, people of colour, people who use drugs, HIV positive people, lots of people who've been doing the work for so long. I kind of, when I look at what I love about sex worker community, which is not perfect, sex worker community has plenty of problems. Even to say the sex worker community, I think kind of obscures lots of differences and oppressions internally that exist. But one of the things that I find so inspiring and I guess really a huge privilege about being part of the communities that I'm part of as a trans sex worker, I said that phrase a lot tonight, is I'm surrounded by people who I really consider pioneers, in community organising, and where solidarity and the idea that everything is for everyone has always been at the forefront of what's happening. I think we can look back to the emergence of HIV/AIDS in Australia and look at who was effectively responding at a grassroots community level and who was leading that. And so I agree with everything, I agree with the really lovely sentiments that you've both just said, and it's all really true, but I sometimes, I kind of wonder if it is about others just actually catching up and stepping up to where other parts of the community are already actually really excelling.
Can I just add then a really important point around the dimensions of our communities and the similarities that we have with other really, really important battles and and flanks in the discussion around social progress. When we look at what's happening with the need to get better at reconciliation, at treaty, at the discussions of what it means to actually stop as a politician or as a country post-settlement in Australia and say, righto, we want to learn, but we want to walk with our First Nations communities. You can see how it is that LGBTIQA+ folk and other communities, whether it's coal miners or whether it's First Nations communities, whether it's people in really vulnerable situations, have an incredible capacity to organise and to find connection and to really engage with the feeling of being marginalised or not heard. And I think that's one of our enormous strengths, to go to what it was that Joe said before around HIV/AIDS and what continues to drive so many parts of our communities to get up and to just keep doing it and doing it and doing it and engage with other parts of our society and our community as well.
Can I just add a point on that? So my observation is the empowerment that sometimes the trans community can have in relation to cultural change. And I say this from the point of view of having lived in the Northern Territory and connected to for example, some of the trans community there, the sister girls, for example, and the power they have in relation to their communities in enabling change in culture that has been there for perhaps a long time, but then to become part of women's business within community. Yeah. That is a strong element of empowerment, not just in the context of their community, but also women as such, and then generally everyone else accepting them for who they are. So the empowerment context is one that's really one that we should not discount in relation to that, but really observe and let it grow.
I think that's right, and I think it's really important to recognise that you're not bringing trans people along or inviting them in. We as trans people, we are rising because we have always existed throughout time, throughout culture, the point before. And right now we are rising, and we invite you to join us.
All right. That was a great conversation, guys.
I don't know what we were talking about.
Oh, you talked about all sorts of things, and I think that, and there's such brilliant points as well, because I think we often talk about community as though it's this sort of solid and static thing, and progress as though it's linear, and neither of those things are true. Community is complex, and if we can, it is something that can evolve, and is also many different moving parts that go sort of forwards and backwards. So I think it's both those things of inviting in and catching up and moving in all sorts of different directions. I studied philosophy. All right, we're getting it towards the end of the plug and gamble turners and fitters induction. So let's see how things are progressing with Janice at the helm.
I think you'll find you're on mute, lol. Is that button down in the corner?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just...
Oh, don't worry. Don't worry. Happens to the best of us. Although, I have to say, for someone who's just about to start in our IT department, we might need to keep our eye on you. Lol.
No, it's the filters. They're new.
Oh, yes. Abracadabra. Yes, you can do that now, You can change the filter, you can apply all these different settings, you can blur the background, you can even... Oh, I saw a video the other day of a lawyer practicing law as a cat.
Oh.
Can you believe it, a cat? Whoa!
I bet he was perfect.
What? Anyway, to be honest, after the fuss this morning, I just had to brighten my day.
Oh, is everything okay?
Oh, well, as you might imagine, I chair our corporate culture and social issues working group. It's not really a group as such, it's just me and Cheryl. Oh, and Tula in dispatch, but Tula never turns up to meetings. She has 5 Shih Tzus. So anyway, we're all set for today's digital bake sale. It's World Refugee Day. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. Happy World Refugee Day.
Oh, FY info far from it. Because before I could even sell one virtual lady's finger, we had to pull the plug. I had suggested that we donate the money raised to a small community organisation I heard about from another PFLAG mum, and they help LGBTIQ+ asylum seekers and refugees hoping to settle in Australia. But Cheryl pulled the plug right out from under me and said we should donate it to a much larger organisation because she thinks they can look after LGBTIQ+ just as well alongside everyone else hoping to settle in our great brown land.
Well, I have to say I'm kind of surprised.
Right? I mean, same-sex acts between adults are illegal in more than 60 UN member states, and more than 40 UN member states have legal barriers to the freedom of expression on sexual and gender diversity issues. Oh, and less than a baker's dozen offer constitutional protection against discrimination based on sexual orientation.
You're incredibly well informed.
I know I am. And LGBTIQ+ asylum seekers, refugees and other forcibly displaced people, well, they experience a range of discrimination as they navigate a process that often operates through rigid, gendered, binary and heteronormative assumptions, which creates additional challenges in proving their claims for protection. And the capacity of support services, wow, don't get me started.
I didn't.
Well, this whole situation is stickier than a digital coffee scroll, but there you have it.
Oh, that Janice, she contains multitudes. Well, the digital bake sale at Plug and Gamble and Turners and Fitters seems to be the least of the issues raised by our friend Janice there. Renee, do LGBTIQ+ asylum seekers and refugees face unique challenges when compared to the broader population?
Yes, we do, because when we're talking about, by the way, I feel like she read the Canberra statement from FDPN, so it's well done. I feel when we're talking about gender, sexual orientation, intersex characteristics, and when you add on top of all of this visa status, it's changed the game because the visa is really defined what you can do and what you can't. And when we think that any asylum seeker can come to service and receive it, it's a misconception because some, even LGBTIQ organization, I'm not talking about you, anyone in different states, they don't provide support for all people. They provide support only for people who have Medicare. But some people on a bridging visa, they don't have it. When we coming to LGBTQ spaces and we'll think, oh, we will get support there, sometimes they, when they realize that person of color speaking with accent or white passing speaking with accent and plus some strange, unusual visa, they get very confused and they're like, we will call FDPN and they would help you. But we don't have co-funding. You establish organization, service provider with thousands of and sometimes millions of money, and you just drop them to us volunteers who are trying to run and to make this change. So during the conference we identify all of these gaps, and the last, if you want to know more about these challenges and why it's harder, you can jump onto our website, fdpn.com.au and .org.au, and pass the training. And we developed this training for service providers, the resettlement services, and for LGBTIQ organizations with a baseline how you can support LGBTIQ people. And this training module was first of all developed with people seeking asylum, refugees and migrants. So they were our advisory committee who guided all of this process, and we have recorded their stories and their voices as a training material for you. And it was developed with great people and other partners. So you can go, because I feel like we're running out of time. I will cut myself.
Great. I was about to say, we are sort of running out of time, but so quick answers. This is the final round. Jesmyn, how does Australia rank alongside the rest of the world when it comes to protections for LGBTIQ plus asylum seekers?
It's a very delicate question, and I think it comes from the fact that, number one, we're dealing with issues that are conflated: sexual orientation and sexual identity. So if you look at the Migration Act of 1958 here, which is some parts of it a reflection of the Refugee Convention, you know that one of the 5 grounds, being a member of a particular social group, is that route in. But then the other point, which I think Renee had explained quite clearly earlier, in the context of, which goes to the context of credibility almost. And credibility, are you gay enough? Are you lesbian enough? In the context of those proceedings that happen, is where it breaks the person down. Because you've got to understand the first challenge they have is their own mental health issue of trying to come out to say you are gay. And then having to deal with their own community, even within the detention center or a community that they live in relation to that fact. So the sexual identity aspect does not even come into a reference point yet, because they're more trying to deal with the issue of sexual orientation. And here is where it's unfortunate that in a number of cases sometimes, even during the proceedings, they are asked to actually produce evidence. It's as if the videotapes of their homemade videos are what they want to see, the perversion of all that. But in fact, when you look at the definition of sexual orientation, it's really about that immutable characteristic that's enduring in terms of emotional, romantic, or sexual sort of association. So it's not just that sexual act, but it's conflated, and that's what they want to see to assess credibility. So that aspect of it makes it challenging and makes, sometimes some of these processes not make Australia look so good in the context of how we deal with these issues. So that needs to change. We need to understand that it's not about the sexual act, but it's more than that. It's the enduring, immutable characteristic of the person, if you want to sort of make a difference.
It happens. Sometimes it happens, and immigration officers may ask these questions, but the problem is coming that this training is not compulsory for people to know that they shouldn't ask these questions. And I'm surprised myself, but I would say that sometimes, and more we can see from the work with our community, these questions were asked less and less. So we need to have more compulsory trainings, because when it's optional, we're having this.
And to the point, Janice's colleague Cheryl's point, of large mainstream organisations being just as well placed to provide that sort of support to LGBTIQ plus people. Janet, what do you reckon?
No.
Yeah, right, great.
That's the quick answer. I mean, we know, and Thorne Harbour Health is switchboard, we know that organisations that are LGBTIQ community controlled, that's governed, owned, established, created, governed, managed, and the services provided by the communities that are most affected are the most effective organisations. And they're really, really important in also training the broader service system about the issues, the policy, so that those mainstream organisations can provide better services. So, we can't be everywhere. We try to be everywhere. I mean, we are everywhere in terms of our community, but unfortunately our service system is not. It's tiny and incredibly badly resourced. But we're working on it, aren't we, Joe? And bit by bit we'll grow our community infrastructure. But that's a lot. That's a decade life work, really. But in the meantime, we do need to hold mainstream organisations that hold the funding accountable. But I would say to government, you can't we will never run good mainstream organisations to support all of the bits of our community until we have a strong LGBTIQ plus community infrastructure to hold those organisations accountable to deliver really good services. So start funding us properly.
I feel like you were asking me directly, but...
So hopefully, Martin Foley and the Minister for Housing, Richard Wynne and others are watching us as we do this.
I would agree with everything you've just said. I would just add that We need the infrastructure, but we need a diversity of participation
Absolutely.
in that infrastructure.
That's right.
And we need to make the place, we need to make the encouragement, the mentorship that needs to exist so that people of color, trans and non-binary folk, and people who are not from this nation, who are migrants and refugees, have a place in that infrastructure.
Couldn't agree more. And in fact, I actually think that we need lots and lots of different, because we're not one community, despite the fact that we keep talking about our community. We're not one community. And so, and that's partly organising. We have to do the work. We have to build our organisations, we have to make them stable, and we have to get funding. And some governments are better at funding than others, but this is a really long project, and we all have to be a part of it.
And to those points, Dylan, can mainstream organisations meet the needs of sex workers?
I mean, I think for sex workers, what we know is that the principle of nothing about us without us is the fundamental principle that it's what works. Sex workers are experts in our own lives and in our work, and we don't actually need people who've never done sex work telling us, I guess, how to organise our communities, how to live our lives. But more than that, I think that it's not so much the question what can't those other organisations do? It's more what do you actually get when you see investment in 100% peer-led, run, delivered, everything organisations. I think you get we know from the sex worker experience that you get fantastic peer education and health promotion. You get really strong representation and advocacy, and you get real pride in your own community. I think I've already said this before, but I feel genuinely proud every day to be organising alongside other whores. I'm really proud of it, and I say that word intentionally. I'm not ashamed. And so. I think, I could give you a kind of a dry answer about the evidence base and all of that stuff, but ultimately what I think peer-run organisations, community-controlled organisations offer is, it is community empowerment. I feel actually quite emotional about it, so I think I'll finish there.
And I think that we'll end on that note, unless anyone's got any.
Can I add something? I think it's very important actually to have community-run organizations, because often LGBTQ forcibly displaced people, they don't come to LGBTIQ organizations because they don't see representations. When they come, sometimes we have the staff that are not culturally competent, and there is a problem that they can't provide an interpreter. And really, community organizations, they run and they have trust from the community, and they have accountability to the community, which is very important. And we ensuring and we're trying to work for the benefit of all LGBTQ community, and really do not leave anyone behind, and support, because everyone is deserves support in this safe space where you can trust and come and receive the support without patronizing attitude, or you're such exotic refugee, or with this white savior approach, look at you, you're such a resilient and strong and powerful. We need these safe spaces where we can help each other and be stronger together. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just add, sorry, I'll be super quick, said the MP. Right. We have so many place-based initiatives that are actually demonstrative of how far we've come, and this is where so the Pride Centre, for example, and the way in which we've got Australia's first Gender and Equality Commissioner and the Equality Minister, these are all structures as well as bricks and mortar examples of our communities organising and making progress. So I would say, please, 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 if you're a member of our communities, just put your hand up, stand to be elected, make us more visible so that we can continue to build on the work that we've done, and then people like Janet and Joe will get their funding. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
I just wanted to say one thing I want want to say hi to Todd Fernando, our Commissioner, because I'm sure that he's listening. So hi Todd, and I look forward to catching up with you now you're back from holiday. But I think we need to think about, this is 50 years since decriminalisation, and it's a moment, and I think it would be remiss of me as a service that runs a service for older people to not raise this, is we need to think about LGBTI older people.
Yep.
And that includes, like, we support people in our service who are ageing, who have HIV-related dementia, as just one example. And we have transgender older women who are transitioning for the first time in their lives in aged care facilities. And these are stories we don't hear about of what it meant, what the 50 years of decriminalisation means, of the lives that were lost in a different kind of way through criminalisation. If I had 2 wishes for this year, one would be, we use with this year with 50 years of decriminalisation, is we recognise that when asylum seekers want to come from countries where there's a criminalisation, that we let them come in. So that's a message to our federal government, and that's one message for decriminalisation. And the second would be that we build a service sector that we not only that we want to age into, but that older people who are in it right now are looked after. And that is a lesson of COVID, right? Is that how bad the aged care sector is. And the Royal Commission into Aged Care needs to not be ignored. There are so many learnings there. But we need an aged care sector, an aged care response that we actually feel that we would want to be a part of, and where we could be ourselves in it. So that's my 2 wishes, I guess, for the year of decriminalisation, is to let people in who are facing the same conditions we did 50 years ago, and that we have a service for older people in Victoria. We have a more complete service response.
Can I jump and add something else? First lesson, English class in Australia, our teacher said, shorten your name, make it cute, make it pronounceable. You will have to find a job if your name is unpronounceable. And when you're saying...
Same situation
And
here.
when you're saying, stand up, come and ask for money, it's sometimes impossible, because we as a people of color and migrants and refugees, sometimes we can't even speak back to white people to pronounce our name right. And not everyone can sacrifice their comfort, as I decided, come here, sit together and talk about LGBTQ refugee issues. You need to make steps and find this community and give them support, because they don't know the system sometimes. It's very fucking hard to try to figure out this system and how you people build these connections and networks. So if you can see the job is done, come to us, approach us, help us. Thank you.
We just need more people with lived experience like Renee making policy, and on that point we should support the ending of indefinite detention bill that's in table now at the moment.
All right, bringing it home. I hate to cut you all off because there are some brilliant points there, but it is time to go back to Janice and Daffod for one last time. Or is it?
And with that, the final module in our 16-part induction series is complete. Oh, welcome, Damien. Oh, doesn't time fly? But now you are inducted into Plug and Gamble, Fitters and Turners, lol. Oh, I think we've covered just about everything I can think of. Oh, there is one more thing though, actually. As Kenny Rogers says, you've got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them.
Thank you, Janice. It's been great getting to know you. It's been quite a ride. And as Dolly Parton would say, if you want the rainbow, you've got to be prepared to put up with the rain.
Oh, why don't we go out there
and give it all we got?
Right on!
Baby, when I met you, there was peace unknown. I set out to get you with a fine-tooth comb. I was soft inside, she's coming, slowly losing sight of the real thing. Janice Blackett, ladies and gentlemen.
You do something to me that I can't explain. Hold me closer and I feel no pain. Every beat of my heart.
we feel. Please just why rehearse. We ride together, making love to each other,
Don't call HR.
Islands in the streets, sing along. That is what we are. Nobody like David on Twitter. Voice season 9. Away with me to another world as we rely on each other. From one love to another. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done, Daffy.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And a round of applause for everyone here. They are real. Everyone on your panel, Ash Flanders, Andrea Powell, I'm Zoe Koonsma. Have a great night.
Zoe Coombs Bar, everyone. What about her? She's all right too.
Thanks.
What a hoot.
Thanks, everyone. That's it, right?
Okay, let's go then. This is awkward. Okay, I guess that's the end of the show.